All right, you're back on the Paraglider Radio Talk Show. We got another guest on the line. Murray, can you hear us?
Yes, I can indeed.
How you doing, Murray?
Not bad, not bad. It was a choice. Listen to the show or go out flying.
Oh, no, you listened to the show?
Decided for a change to give flying a miss.
Oh, man, thanks, Murray. I feel special, man. That's great.
Well, it's been a while since I phoned in.
Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't heard from you, Murray. That must mean that flying must be getting very good in Scotland, huh?
45 hours so far this year.
Good for you.
Hey,
Hey,
Murray.
I've got to work sometimes.
Hey, Murray, we got 45 hours at least this week.
Yeah, I know. I'm hoping
The
to see you
season's
guys
back
in
on.
May. I was hoping for the end of this month, but I've still got far too many things I've got to sort out, including the passport.
Right.
And there's a very helpful chap from the FAA who's going to be sorting out the documentation for my paragliders.
Awesome.
So hopefully we'll get everything tied together. So it ties in quite well with your new next segment and the bit on the previous. You were talking about both on the ground handling and recovery from deflations.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, one of our favourite training procedures is tip touching. So what you lads call kiting and what we over here would call ground handling.
Yeah.
The aim being is you get your paraglider up above you, stabilised, and then using a combination of pitch, yaw and adverse yaw, and roll, you bring one wingtip down to touch the ground, and then you bring the glider back up above you, and then you touch the other wingtip on the ground. And you just do that for 10 minutes.
Yeah, and now this is freaking hard to do, right? I mean,
No.
Well, not for you.
Some gliders won't do it though.
Right.
That's one thing. You know, if people see somebody doing it and they just can't do it, it could be the glider. But most gliders you can. Generally, certainly any DHV2 or above will do it without any problems at all.
Right.
You get one or two DHV1s, just they just don't like it.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say it's hard to do if you haven't practiced it before, and therefore it's something really good to practice. This is something that I practice before I go out and do the aerobatics, for sure, is just being able to control, again, as we've talked about before, being able to control the glider on the ground that well will obviously lead to being a much better pilot when you're up in the air.
I mean, certainly if you can do that on the ground, you'll never get an up-tip collapsing when you're doing wing-overs.
Right.
Because it really keeps you in touch with the pressure, and effectively your engine is maybe as little as only 10% on because there's very little of your weight. Too much brake, the wing's going to drop back into stall. Too little brake, the wing's going to go forwards and frontal collapse.
Right.
If you don't put your swing with forward movement as well, so you're not putting the loading on the risers evenly to bring it back up, and it just won't work. It really keeps you in tune with your glider.
Absolutely, yeah, it is. It's brilliant practice. I think for anybody that wants to do tight turns or anybody that wants to get on the this really want handling practice that you can learn.
And the kids show you how much of non-flying bubbles you can't shake. And about 7 different. Well, on it, particularly with the Tito Christi, it goes you to around the pot, and the biggest frame I've ever had from say 90% deflation is about 2 seconds.
Right.
Just 90% you'll do a 360. If it's anything, if you've got at least 40%, you just weight shift it.
Great. Hey Murray, we're gonna be taking a break here for just a moment. So if you want to stay on the line with us, we'll keep talking it. Thanks a lot, Murray. This is the Paraglider Radio Talk Show on WSRadio.com, the worldwide leader in internet talk. We're going to be right back with you in just a moment.
David and Gabriel Jebb.
All right, welcome back to the show. Murray, you still on the air with us?
I am indeed.
All right, we're just talking deflations. I think we were talking. Oh gosh, this is the teaser. I'm sorry. Well, next segment we're going to be talking more deflations.
And the infamous Murray Hayes from Scotland will be adding some expert advice on this topic. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Not expert advice. I don't do deflation.
Be right back, bud. All right, now we're back to the show. Murray, are you still with us?
I'm still with you.
All right.
Murray, apologize. It seems like...
Okay. Matthew was just saying that. There's too many adverts on MSN, but the thing is, that's what pays for the show. No adverts, no show. We've got to live with it.
That's true. And honestly, we'll just plug this right now. We need some sponsors for the show. So if anybody else wants to advertise, to put more advertisings on our show, or at least take away some of the non-paragliding ones, please give us an email or a phone call. We do need sponsors for the show because actually some of this is coming out of my father in my pocket. And
I'm afraid my advertising money at the moment is going on promoting the magazine over in
exactly.
the UK.
I know. It's tough, but that's what you got to do if you love the sport and you want to see it grow safely. So.
Yeah.
You know, Murray, an interesting thing, we had a pilot call in, and this is kind of a typical situation. Pilots complain about hardly using the brakes and stalling the wing when they're having a major deflation. And oftentimes you'll hear about guys
hardly using the brakes and stalling.
Yeah, in other words, a guy saying, I barely tapped my brakes and I stalled my wing. Well,
right.
Again, realizing that the glider is going to stall much easier if there's only a small bit of it still flying.
Well,
So
one good example which really relates to that, I fly a whole range of vertexes from a 22 to a 28. And on the 22, if you're flying down carrying a couple of other gliders for folks, say if it's really gone a bit non-flyable, I mean the stall characteristic is a hook, a reverse J. When it reaches the stall point, it'll just stall and it drops out of the sky. Whereas if your wing loading is low, you tend to have a much more benign. Same relates with DHV rating. The DHV ones are very slow, smooth, gentle, benign stalls. And it's exactly the point you mentioned earlier. Half the wings collapsed, wing loading's higher, your stall characteristics will change.
And not only that, like if half the wings collapsed and the pilot's aware of it, they're usually a little bit more nervous and whatnot. And so they're not, he's saying I barely tapped the brakes.
Usually a little bit
probably,
more frantic.
Yeah, he probably was yanking the brakes down to his ankles, Just
if you look at the pictures in the magazines, videos and things like that, people taking off, look at how much brakes, and you ask them, they'll say, I wasn't using any brakes. You show them the picture, and they've got 6 inches of brakes on.
Or more.
Or more.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things that happens oftentimes when you listen to people that have had major deflations and result in them throwing the reserve, oftentimes they'll say, just as they threw the reserve, their wings started flying again. And that's usually indicative because just what happens before they throw the reserve, they let go of the brakes, they reach for the grab the handle to throw the reserve, and the wing starts flying again. Yeah. So again, this is not uncommon.
This is just it's just a simple case for over control, which is what we all tend to do.
Right.
Well, I was doing my favourite crosswind takeoffs and training at Arbroath the other day. The easterly about 10 knots, with a wee bit gust, but nothing too major. So that's a 90-degree crosswind. I'm taking off. Within a fraction of a second, I've turned downwind. Then I'm turning into land. And taking the dive, keeping the energy on, and then I'm getting halfway back up the bank. So I'm regaining sort of 30, 40 feet. Because I'm in touch with the glider. So sometimes you'll see me pulling on 2 foot of brake, but I only pull it on, put it off.
Right.
It's progressive. But the vast amount of pilots, they tend to do something and they wait for some indication as to what's going to happen.
Right.
By which time it's far too late. They've had it on too long. So the more people can do with ground handling, flying maybe a 10-foot high ridge, just doing wee hops, feeling for the stall point. Every time you come into land when you've got nothing better to do, take the glider just until it stalls, but before it stalls, recover.
Yeah.
And maybe practice that only about 5 feet off the ground.
Exactly, 10-foot high ridge.
Right.
There's no walk-ups.
Yeah. Cool.
You do it all day long.
So what induces a deflation? Why does the glider deflate?
Lack of pressure on the wing or change of airflow. It can be either. If the airflow is changed so it's coming from above, you can get a frontal collapse. If your angle of attack has changed, not the angle of pitch, again, a lot of pilots think the angle of attack and pitch are the same.
Right.
But if you think about a cliff launch, as you walk towards the cliff and as you take off, the pitch is almost constant. But the angle of attack can change by 45 degrees or more as you reach the edge. So we have to get pilots used to separating angle of attack and pitch.
Okay.
Whether the glider's above you or not doesn't matter too much so long as the glider's flying.
Right.
And it's again something Gabriel was mentioning a couple of weeks ago.
Absolutely. So then, when the angle of attack reaches certain point, and I believe it would be a fair
16 degrees.
16 degrees. Is that the exact?
Well, it varies, but roughly most wings will stall between about 12 and about 16 degrees.
Right. Okay. That's when they'll stall. And for the deflation, you have any idea what that is?
Well, I regularly come in, say, 300 feet, and I'll hold it on a parachutal stall all the way down to
Right.
touchdown.
Okay.
The deflation is when the drag is such that the wings drop back, so it's not so much the angle of attack directly as to how far back it is compared with the pilot. Once it drops back beyond a certain point, the trailing edge, you'll get a curl over, and it flips, and then you get your classic horseshoe. And in 1,200 hours, I've never done that.
Okay.
I've never stalled the glider.
There's a few schools of thought in terms of the deflating of the wing, whether it deflates because of a reduction in pressure on the wing, whether it deflates because it's reached a certain angle of attack, just like the wing will stall when it reaches a certain angle of attack above neutral. I think if the wing reaches a certain angle of attack below neutral, so that it's not getting the vertical and the horizontal ram air component anymore, it'll also deflate.
Yeah, that gives you your classic frontal
Right.
speed system, plus you get a gust, which changes it. But of course, again, that's the other favourite mistake. Paragliders actually fly with a negative pitch,
Right.
but with a positive angle of attack. So again, it's separating it. The pitch should always be negative
Right.
to maintain your speed in forward flight. But as you correctly state, it's when the angle of attack changes.
Right. So that's just to help some of our listeners just visualize when you're looking at your wing, the intakes look like they're facing down, and that's the pitch. But the airflow that they're receiving, the relative wind that they're receiving, is still a positive. If that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah. No,
We gotta
okay.
have a
Yeah.
whiteboard so we can draw this stuff out. In either case, I wanted to talk a little bit about what the onset of deflations, because it's something that I believe a lot of pilots could avoid. One of the things, what are some of the things that cause deflations? Well, you already stated, Murray, when you're flying accelerated, and you'll fly through some turbulence, or the airflow over the wing will change. And so this is just inherent danger of flying with the accelerator on. That's not going to be something you can necessarily avoid, but when you feel that the wing's starting to depressurize along the leading edge, or if you look up and you see it depressurizing along the leading edge, let off the accelerator, slow the glider down a little bit. You can keep your feet on the accelerator and give a little bit of brake at the same time, and that'll actually increase the tensioning in the wings some.
One of the classics for coming into those sort of situations would be the downdraft around a strong thermal as well.
Right. Absolutely. So then the transition area between the up and the down and the thermal, coming out of a thermal, you're gonna hit a lot of sink. You're gonna hit a lot of downdraft. You also hit a lot of turbulence. So there's another spot where we may give a little bit of extra brake to keep that angle of attack positive. We may get off the accelerator if we were flying in an accelerated state in thermal. And we may just be a little bit more active. Actually, leaning back in your harness some will increase your angle of attack slightly. So as soon as you hit the turbulence, I always tell the students to lean back, relax, take a deep breath, and all that good stuff. And it's because just by you changing your loading in the harness from the very front of the seatboard, because you're nervous and you're sitting straight up, to leaning back and relaxing, you're actually putting a little bit more load on the rear risers and taking just a bit
Probably
of it off
also
the front.
have slightly less drag, so you swing forward slightly more,
Right.
which would have exactly the same effect
Same
as you
effect.
just stated.
Right. So it's a combination in that case, and so those are a couple of things that you could do to help prevent the onset of a deflation. When the glider is actually deflated, I guess, Murray, you and I agree, and my dad agrees, that the steering, not clearing, just steer is the proper way to recover from a deflation if you're near terrain, if you're close to the ground, or if you just want a guaranteed method of getting away. The other method that I think you started on, Murray, and that I've done before, and a lot of more pilots will do if they have some more altitude or a little bit more experience level, is either turn into the deflation, do a full 360, or then turn in and then roll out with like a wing
Yeah.
hover type thing.
Use the energy in the wing.
Right. So keep.
I think one of the key things, again, with that is that a lot of the books were written or are still being written by people that are thinking about paragliding the way it was. Even the DHV-1 wing now is nothing like the original sort of development from jump chutes.
Right.
They're much thinner in the depth of the wing. So the traditional pumping out type arrangements, which work when we use a 9-cell jump chute parachute for PLF training, just off a sort of 20-foot rise,
Right.
and that you pump. That's the only way to do it.
Right.
But on a paraglider, a modern one, and okay, there are still people that are flying old gliders, but we don't want to encourage old gliders because even a modern glider that's a higher rating is a better safety.
Right.
And that's why they've improved. And we've got to start looking at the training for the current gliders.
So the misunderstanding with pilots then is with the older square sheets, if you were doing skydiving or
Yep.
in the military, the original paragliders that were 20 cells or so, there you had to get the intakes back into the airflow. You had to actually have ram air pressure on the intakes in order to open the wing back up or to reinflate it, repressurize it. Nowadays, we use the existing pressure that's inside of the wing. And the way that I think of pressure inside of a wing, I think of it as like a contractor's level, where you've got the little bubble in the center one moving to the left and the right based on the tilt of the level or the bank of the wing. And if you have the left side of the wing deflated, the left side of the wing is going to be creating more drag. It's going to be turning the level, pushing down the left side, lifting up the right side. In order to get the bubble back, in order to get it to open up the left side, you need to push down on the right side, lift up the left side so that the bubble moves up towards the left, so the pressure moves back towards the deflated side portion of the wing.
And again, just to reiterate, the problem with many pilots' thinking is that they try to bring that bubble back or that neutral position back with just using brake.
Yeah.
And that's the real problem with overcorrecting or overreacting.
There's still the tendency to think of, as Gabriel was saying there, that the pressurization is from the front. We've got a new website up, and it's a cartoon done by the chap Kevin Pearson, who does Sky God, Sammy
Right.
Sky God,
Yep.
and he does the Parapontus for the magazine.
Uh-huh.
And that's all the W's paraboffin.info.
Right.
And the first one that we've done on that load, there's also a young paraboffin, sort of still very much in development, essentially is stating that the main reason that modern paragliders stay inflated is actually the airflow above and below the wing. It sucks the wing outwards.
Right.
And for those that doubt it, when you look at any of the modern ones which are going for partially closed leading edges, where the leading edge is partially closed, it's not pushed backwards, it's actually sucked forwards as well.
Right.
We've got to move into the modern world with modern paragliders and update everything. Now, you guys do it, we do it, there's a lot of people are doing this, but there's still quite a few, shall we say, the old school, who have not moved forward with the vast improvements that the manufacturers have been doing.
I've been thinking about this a lot because you and I spoke about it quite a bit when we were in the UK, or when I was in the UK, and I don't know if it's a hesitation on the part of what we're calling the old school right now, or if it's just simply there's not the understanding that people need to know how this stuff works and realize it, because
there's a big lack of knowledge.
Right.
The basic core science.
Right. And I was thinking about it this weekend when I sit down and I try to explain some of the aerodynamic concepts to some of my students. So I'm really, trying to tie it in and why it's pertinent and this and that. And some of the guys just drift off. They just want to fly, and they're just here to learn how to fly.
But this stuff will keep you alive.
Right. And that's the point that you can't make until you've been in the sport a little bit. I mean, that, I know that, but Murray, is that how you got into paragliding?
Well, my background is a vast range of different science subjects, and I've always been one of these people that can both be good and annoying. When I was at school, I had two nicknames. One was Jungle Boy. Now, every year for PE, I got the lowest mark that we give you. They sort of said, you've got to play rugby, and I went, right, fine. And they had these guys that played rugby, and I just went smashing through them, and then stood there and said, right, somebody won the ball. Yeah, I just wouldn't cooperate. So I spent every year in the swimming pool. But then the sixth year, they based the testing on the American part of the American Marines Fitness Entrance Test. And the only two guys that beat me swam in the Olympics. At the same time, I was doing hardcore science subjects.
Right. Hey, Murray, I hate to stop you right now.
We'll
Sorry,
just
but
wait for the break.
okay, bud.
Hold that thought, Murray. Okay, this is WS Radio, the Paraglider Show. We'll be right back with you. Hang on.
David and Gabriel Jebb.
And Murray.
Okay.
By the way, it's Hay, H-A-Y.
H-A-Y, not Hayes, Dad.
Got it.
Yep.
Thank
So
you,
I sort of spent all the years at school and then went on, and while I was actually still at school, came third in a sailing competition. Used to sail a Wayfarer, which is sort of meant to be crewed between 2 and 6 people, and I used to go out solo on it all the time and go out for 10 hours. So I had the sort of physical side. And in physics, I was banned from answering any questions in physics for 3 years.
You were
Well, I
banned?
had one very bad year. I got 97%, must have slipped that year. But so I had the background of science and physics. Spent years dancing and working in nightclubs as a photographer, but splitting up more fights than all the door staff put together. But it came to a point when the back was starting to feel the wear and tear. And I thought, well, I love dancing. I like moving about. I like motion. I'm into mountain sports, skiing, snowboarding, all that sort of stuff. I want a sport which is going to be low impact. So I took up paragliding and bought a full comp wing, and so I did a couple 100 hours in my first year.
Wow.
Well, actually, not quite true. I was about a year and I think it was about a year and 3 months before I did 200 hours.
Wow. Amazing, huh? So that's where Murray's coming from, and that's why you always bring a extremely diverse but yet interesting
Analytical background.
Well,
to the show.
The thing was, it was only recently, really, with the paragliding and with setting up the club, and only in the last year that came up with the photogliders law bit, the questioning of everything.
Right.
Now, that's the first time I'd put it into words, but
Right.
it's something that I've been doing
Your
since I
whole
was
life.
at primary school.
Right.
So I designed and had built a kite that was effectively a paraglider to learn the how. And the guy says, we can rig up kites for you and all the rest of it. I said, no, just supply the materials once you've stitched this together the way I want. And I spent hours playing about with the airfoil, trying to find out how they fly, all the quirks.
Right.
And that was before I actually bought the first paraglider.
Right.
Haul it apart, find out how it works, put it back together, and then look at what information's out there. Look at the books, look at the test books, but question them.
Right.
And there's an awful lot of things, because I highlighted them on the first books I bought. It was highlighting pens, comments, questions all over. And there's a lot of stuff I used to think was right. And then as it evolves, I find out that some of the things that I thought was right, and a lot of things that were in the books were actually wrong.
Right.
Or weren't complete explanations and could lead to errors.
Right. That's also, that's the way that I've been sorting it out too, because there's not a lot of info that's written giving you the right, maybe not the right explanation, but the practical explanation that works, because everybody's drawing off of stuff that's 20 years old.
Yeah, I've got hang gliding books going back to 74, and they have the same mistakes in them that some of the current generation's books have.
Right.
And I put it down to the fact that people are inherently lazy, and a lot of the stuff they were taking was correct, but it was correct from the powered general aviation world. You apply it to an aircraft that doesn't have an engine apart from your weight.
Right.
And it's like the section that they've got on the powered aircraft when the engine's off, but that's not where they've copied the illustrations from. That's not where they've taken information from.
Right. And that's a rather narrow section, because there's still not a lot of understanding about it in some areas.
So Murray, the problem with the paragliding gene pool is there's no lifeguard.
Yeah.
And we try to be that, because again, I look at myself, maybe I'm more old school, but the technology is changing.
I'm not going to make a comment, but
the technology is changing. It's you young guys that are looking at these things in depth.
No,
and,
old school and new school, that's skiing. I wouldn't say you're old school.
Well, yeah.
You might be old school for equipment, like the Warren Miller stuff, old school, new school, and all the rest of it. And we were preschool, but you seem to be like Gabriel, like myself, like a lot of folks that are getting involved now or have been involved for a while, you're questioning stuff.
Well, see,
And the old school wasn't questioning.
Well, that's the thanks to you and your motto. I mean, I think that's something that we all should be doing is questioning. And I think people like Gabriel, here's a guy that causes me to question even my thinking. And it's being around you guys, the younger guys in the sport that are coming up with these new ideas that I think is going to keep some of the old school from, being a part of the problem. And that is really what's basically happened when you look at some of the things that are going on in the sport today. There's a lot of problems that are slowly getting fixed, but not fast enough.
Well, in the UK, I don't know about in the States, but they reckon that 1/3 of all reserve deployments are accidental.
It's a fairly similar statistic in the U.S.
And yet people are still making excellent reserves. I mean, the shoots themselves are brilliant.
Yeah.
But the deployment method is from the dark ages.
Right.
We're working with a couple of parachute companies at the moment, which we've already mentioned on the show, so we won't go back into it, but basically using a pulp system.
Right.
I mean, there's so long as everybody's questioning everything, it doesn't matter if they're right or wrong initially, but once people start talking, not arguing, but talking and discussing things,
right,
we'll all gain.
Yeah, and everybody gets thinking and new ideas come up, and yeah, you're right. It's...
And the death rate is unacceptable.
The unfortunate thing, though, about our sport is that it's such a small community that there's the people in the sport that are trying to make a living out of it, like ourselves. It's like there's no interaction per se between us and some of the other major schools, other than the fact that one of my very close friends runs the second or third largest school in the U.S. Like we talk a lot. But between the other schools, it's a lot of jealousy. It's a lot of almost working against each other as opposed to with each other. So as a result, the community as a whole really loses out. And you see that on the bigger scale with the schools. You see it between flying sites,
or manufacturers.
And the thing is the ideas, the knowledge, it's all there already. All the pieces of the puzzle are there. It's just that we're not putting them together because we can't work
People aren't
together.
working or cooperating together. That's right.
Well, that's why all the stuff that I do for the magazine is sort of, look, this is free.
Right.
I don't want to be paid for this. Right. I don't necessarily want everybody to agree with it because that's pointless. That's the situation we've got. People read a book, they agree with it.
Right now.
I want people to question it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you do a perfect job on your website, just, big letters question everything.
There's bits where I've had really, really almost libel, nasty comments from certain areas, shall we say.
Right.
I don't wipe them out. I don't hide them. I put them up there and say, listen, folks, read this, look at what's happening, look at accident rates, look at death rates, look at our flying hours, make up your own mind.
Right.
Think about it, question it.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing. I mean,
and we're all going to gain.
Yeah. Yeah, and this isn't a sport where you necessarily want to accept the status quo because it hasn't proven too much in the past.
Be a great track record.
Yeah. So
we do a lot of reading of the general aviation accident bulletins. Now, clearly, we're not flying with complex engines and stuff like that. I mean, 99% of all my flying is gliding, but there's a lot to be learned. The mindset, the risky shift. If you're flying with 4 pilots, you're actually more likely to have an accident because the conditions are a bit marginal, but we've all gone there. Oh, no, it's okay, and I don't want to look silly in front of my mates. I don't want to turn around and say, no, we're not going to fly, pack up and go home.
Right.
And yet people say, oh, but you shouldn't fly alone. You're safer with somebody else.
Right. No, that's true. That's really true. It's the human psyche, and
ego.
Yeah. Fear and ego. I still think are two big things that really hinder us. I was I don't know if you ever went to the website that I think I gave you, the glime.com, where they have all the FOI or all the fundamentals of instruction.
No, actually, I can't remember that. If you want to.
Yeah, I'll give it on the air right now. Go to www.gleime.
Right, I remember that. Yeah, I actually mistyped it and I couldn't find it, and then I forgot all about it.
Okay, GLEIM.com, glime.com. This is the group that writes up all the tests. It writes up it's basically all the curriculum for the FAA. And I had another instructor's clinic this week, and yesterday we were going through the FOI test, which is the Fundamentals of Instruction. It's for your basic ground instruction certification.
Mm.
And I was reading through it, and I remember the first time I took the test, I don't know, 5 years ago or so, is when they instituted that we had to take it. Um, I went through and I thought, man, this is really stupid, because a lot of it was real concerned with just the semantics of like different methods of learning and different methods of is it the law of realization or the law of perception, or is it the law of this when a student finally does such and such and such, and I never appreciated it until yesterday. I went through, and this is the second time this year I've administered this test. I went through and I looked at it, and I actually read all the questions aloud to the guys, and we started talking about it. And I was like, it's absolutely brilliant, some of it. And right there in writing, the FAA says you need to question everything.
Mm.
And that was one of the questions. They said, is it better to have a pilot that accepts, that his checklist is never going to change, or a pilot that, will add new items onto it and take off
Yeah.
other ones?
Constantly revise,
Yeah.
question, change of equipment. There may be a subtle change that the manufacturers put in, but they're not wanting to particularly advertise
Right.
and promote. But it's just something somebody in the back room has done.
Mm-hmm.
And it can have major knock-on effects. The secondary, the third. It's very rarely the first effect, the first thing you do that will kill you or
Right.
cause an accident or save you from an accident. It's the knock-on effects, the secondaries. That's the key.
And
Start to look at the whole picture.
yeah, it's I mean, for the negative, the cascade of events that you hear. It's not just the collapse; it's the collapse to the spin, to the stall, to the asymmetric recovery and data, whatever. So it's yeah, right on. Well, God, we're getting deep this segment here, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just sitting
Yeah,
back.
let's
hanging on.
let's
Well, we're hoping this summer, we've got an invite from one of the guys that was watching me flying the 10-foot high seawall.
Yeah.
And after I landed after 40 minutes, he turns out to be one of the guys on the local lifeboat. So they've invited me out. And one of the things I suggested to them, which may or may not come off, I have a complete new set of lines I've got to fit to one of my vertexes. So pre-doing that, what I might do is launch off the sea cliff, fly out and land in the water, and we'll film the whole thing as a training exercise. Because the general view is, land in the sea, you're going to die.
Right.
And I just don't believe that.
Rory, what is the water temperature in your area?
Oh, shit.
Cold.
Cold.
Put in a wetsuit.
Mary, you're a crazy man.
So
moments.
So what are you going to do?
The main thing being is, because I have a complete set of new lines and risers to fit, I don't have to worry about the salt in the lines.
Right.
Now, salt on the wing I'm not concerned with, because that will wash off. But salt in the lines clearly is not a good idea. You'll get crystallization.
Right.
But I just thought, well, if you've got a lifeboat on hand, it's going to be a great training exercise from them. And we can film it from a few different angles, hopefully get some pictures, if this comes off. Now, one of the key things is most people land into wind.
Right.
And then what happens? The glider drops on top of them.
Right.
If you actually turn round, you've been flying a sea cliff usually if this happens. If you land crosswind or even downwind, the glider's going to go clear of you.
Yeah.
I mean, has anybody ever thought about these sort of things? Anytime I've seen an SIV video, they've got a rescue boat. Well, what happens if the engine fails?
Right. I actually, I was having this conversation with somebody 2 days ago, because we were talking about the dangers of landing in water, and I said, hey, it's probably best not to flare the glider before you land in the water, and it's probably best, I've always when I've had the peace of mind to unclip from my harness and get ready to jump out, I have, but and now I've heard people say they jumped out from 200 feet because they thought it was 20 and the guy died. So I'm not sure if that's the greatest thing to teach anymore. But the idea that my idea has always been that, yeah, I've had enough water landings where I know that if you land down with a tailwind, or if you don't flare before you hit the water, the wing's going to overfly you, and you can actually get out. And that's probably the only time you can get out, because if it lands on top of you...
If you have a certain amount of downwind component, then the wing, when it hits the water, will still be inflated. It'll sit up like a wall.
Absolutely.
And the wind pressure will actually take you into the shore.
And, well, I haven't been able to go that far, but yeah, no, it'll hit leading edge.
As long as you've got tension on the lines, it's not going to tangle. The other thing is, suppose in the States you guys have sort of net laundry bags, a bit like a big stuff sack with a zip.
Yeah.
Fly with one of those. You land out in the water, you get clear of the glider. All you then need is you've got a net bag. You get the wing tip, you get the trailing edge, and you stuff it into the bag.
Right, right.
You can do that when it's wet.
Yeah, yeah. Not
Suddenly
very quickly,
you've got nothing
but
to tangle up.
Yeah.
And you've still got the harness that you can stay next, which will have a certain amount of flotation.
right.
Any air trapped in there will have a certain amount of flotation, but you're not going to get tangled.
And it actually takes the wing. If you, just like you're describing, I'm talking about, if you hit the wing leading edge down, because it traps the air in there, it'll take the wing about 20 minutes to fill up with water and start to sink.
In the meantime, anybody coming to rescue you can see you from miles away.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, that's
And
fun.
so you're saying you can kind of use that wing while it's nose down as kind of kite surfing to drag you back into the beach,
Possibly, so long as you stay clear of the surf. When you start getting near to the surf, I would get well clear of it.
Yeah, you bet.
But if you're clear of the surf, I would say, yes, that should act like a sail to slowly bring you in.
Cool. Right on.
Murray, we need to take another break. I don't know if you can afford to hang on, man.
No, I think I better watch my phone bill. I'll leave it
Okay,
to somebody
bud.
else to call into the next segment.
Okay.
And hopefully I'll see you guys later this year.
You take good care,
and
Murray.
I'll speak to you off air, find out whether the USCA stuff's been sorted out yet.
All right. Okay.
All the best of the time. Bye.
Yeah.
Hang on, we'll be right back after this brief introduction.